Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Mary Eisen, sitting in for Jonathan Hessen here at TV7 Israel at War. It's the 647th day since the heinous attack of Hamas, the terror army, against Israel on October 7th. Over the last 647 days, we still have 50 hostages held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. We still have within them, hopefully, 20 who are alive. In the last 647 days, Israel has been fighting a multi-front war. We're always focused on the hostages in the Gaza Strip, on the actions of the IDF in the Gaza Strip, but we are in a multi-front war. Over the last few days, we've seen yet again these other portions of the implications of what has happened over the last 647 days in other arenas. With us today to discuss this arena, both the Gaza Strip and the other areas, are three panelists who are with us today. We have from Washington, retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, former Assistant Secretary of State. Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Also from Washington, we have Mrs. Zainab Ribua, a research fellow at the Hudson Institute. Zainab, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. And we have Advocate Ifah Segal, who is at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategic Studies, a senior research fellow. Ifah, a pleasure to have you here, I think for the first time.
Yeah, for sure. But it's always an honor to have you invite me to do anything, Mary.
It's always a pleasure. And with our three panelists right now, what we want to talk about is initially to try and talk a bit about what's happening in Israel's northern border, and in this case, with Syria. Over the last week or so, I've kind of watched how President Ishara, the former jihadist, the head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and now president interim inside Syria, has gone all the way to Azerbaijan, where he was hosted by the Azerbaijani president. So that's on the one hand. There's a lot of backtalk that Israel and perhaps Israelis and Syrians may even have met in Azerbaijan under this auspice. But parallel to those actions, which are very much about diplomacy and what could define our future, we're also looking at, yet again, new uprising, or I should say clashes, violent clashes with death, sadly, in southwest Syria, not too far from the Israeli-Syrian border and quite close to the Syrian-Jordanian border. The area, Sweda in southwest Syria, is an area where you have a very large context of Druze, Syrian Druze. In this day today, they're talking about a possible even Israeli intervention there. Perhaps Israel is attacked, hard to say, against troops, internal security troops. There's clashes going on there. And in that sense, the first thing I'd like to kind of broaden the sense first is, Mark, give us a sense in that way of where the United States right now is looking at this new Syria. There's so much talking about advancing with this new regime. And as I said, on the other hand, there are still clashes there going on. Can you open up a little bit about what this means, United States and Syria, as we look at it right now?
Yeah, it was a decision made by the Biden administration soon after the takeover of Ahmed al-Shara and the fall of the Assad regime that the United States would take a more proactive view in terms of how to move forward with the new Syria. Barbara Leaf and some of our other agencies went into Syria and met with al-Shara in December of 2024. I think the United States just didn't want to be on their back heels when invariably the Chinese would come in and other countries would come in, such as Turkey, and perhaps beat us to the punch in terms of establishing relationships. I think the administration under President Trump has been very much the same, almost to the point of being lenient with the al-Shara regime in terms of where it's going. As we're starting to see, perhaps it's not democratizing as quick as we would like. Continued problems with the SDF up in the north, relations with Turkey, all of those indicate to me that in many ways the United States is trying to remain patient, trying to remain if not an ally, then at least somewhat of a benefactor to Syria, having recently lifted sanctions. But I think much like President Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin, I think it could well be that in the near future, President Trump's relationship with Ahmed al-Shara will start to fray as well.
Interesting that you say that in that sense, Mark, because as I'm thinking about it right now, President Trump met President al-Shara in Saudi Arabia with MBS, with Mohammed bin Salman, just a couple months ago when President Trump was in Saudi Arabia. And you brought up also President Putin. And in that sense, and Zainab, here I'd ask you to perhaps weigh in also on this combination of, so wait a second, Russia used to be the strong power inside Syria. Russia used to be the one and still has what I'm going to call real estate inside Syria. And I saw even in this last week also, on the one hand in Tartus, you have a Russian base, a very large naval base. And on the other hand, the international community was talking about turning Latakia, a different port inside Syria, into some kind of, magnificent, everything's always magnificent, Eastern Mediterranean port that would serve all around. So where is Russia in all of this? How does that bite on and in to looking at Syria trying to go, I want to hope, to a better place?
Yeah, thank you very much. I totally agree with your assessment. I do think that the Russians are in a very tough spot. They are very much, trapped in Ukraine. They are really afraid of doing anything that would upset Trump. And you can see that how they reacted after Trump's attack on Iran. They didn't do much to protect Khamenei. Their signaling was actually the total opposite. I mean, a day after the attacks, one of the first things that happened was the Russians calling the Chinese for economic cooperation. Iran was completely sidelined, and the Russians are actually very much aware that their influence is basically decreasing in terms of reach and so on, especially, for example, in the Caucasus. And you can see that with the Azerbaijan and Armenian relationship. Azerbaijanis and the Armenians are very close now to normalizing ties, and of course the Russians see that as a threat to them. There isn't much they can do about it. However, there are all of these disinformation campaigns, all these political campaigns that the Russians do. Regarding Syria, I believe that the direct outcome is really for the Russians to struggle logistically when it comes to their operation in Africa. Syria is a big hub for coordinating logistics from Africa to Europe and so on. And it seems that I do not think that Putin has a lot of cards to play, apart from one where al-Shara is actively using the Putin card, the close to Russia card, to extract more concessions from the West. Why? Because he understands that if the West does not get more involved, the Russians will. And I think this is something. This is more of a balancing strategic act, because if you take a look at what U.S. envoy Tom Barak said, the United States is really taking a dominant posture in Syria for the first time in really decades.
So I'm going to take, Zainab, what you just said right now about both the United States taking a dominant space inside Syria for the first time, and I'm asking you, but what about Israel? Are we not the dominant ones right now in Syria? Perhaps even today, yet again, we may have attacked this Syria new regime's tanks. I'm not sure about this. I'm just saying. So what is Israel doing in all of this? What is Israel doing when it comes to the United States and to Russia? When we're looking at the Syrian arena, what's in it for us? What are we looking at there?
So it's an excellent question, and I think this is something that we are learning every day. And the situation in Syria is evolving from day to day. What people don't realize, for example, is that the Ashara government does not really control all of Syria, not yet. There is no stability to this new regime. They're working on it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they will get it. It might be a long process. It might be a process that will fail. Even Ashara himself was there were several assassination attempts against him, and it's very, very dynamic. Now, you see the the situation domestically in Syria. And what you've mentioned today with the Druze, for example, there's a lot of instability, possibly even from his own supporters, that maybe want something else. Maybe they don't align with what he's trying to do, which is to get international legitimacy. We don't know, we can't read his heart and mind. We don't know what his true intentions are, but at least his actions show that he's trying to build international legitimacy, at least for the short run. So maybe there is even inside his own supporters, there is a lot of negative feelings about that sort of attempt. So Israel is fitting in here. I think we're trying to see what will happen domestically in Syria. We have a problem, strategic problem, with the fact that the Druze are being killed by Syrians. We can discuss that. We also try to take a cue from the United States and the West because they really want the normalization. I think there's a lot for us to gain from such normalization as long as we do it with with eyes wide open and not kind of fall in love with the idea that all of a sudden there is a peace and love between us and the Syrians. So I think the role that we can play right now is just to take care of our own security interests. And there are still issues with weapons trying to be smuggled into Lebanon, into the hands of Hezbollah and other terror groups. So we are very active in Syria from time to time. Also, we have, as I said, a strategic asset, a strategic issue with the Druze community in Syria. If they are harmed, if they are attacked, then we are put in a very sensitive situation because of that. And then just really kind of wait and see how things develop. And this can be very, very dynamic.
Aoife, I want to take that point for a moment and expand a bit, perhaps for our viewers who may not also be aware in that sense. When we talk about the Druze, for us, it's as if, a given, we understand what we're talking about. Why are the Druze, I think it's important to explain a bit more, why the Druze are unique and are different and are connected both to Israel and to Syria, and for that matter, also to Lebanon as a community. I think that it is really, in this case, that Israel is standing up and saying, we're not going to let our Druze brothers be attacked in Syria, and people erroneously see this as being both a Muslim problem, or they say Muslim, Arab, not enough understanding. If you can just add a bit more about that, I'd really appreciate that.
Okay. So the Druze are their own religion. They believe in all the prophets. There's no contradictions between their beliefs in Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, but it's a new sect kind of from Islam. And they don't have any national aspirations. So they're very loyal to whatever state is hosting them. That's why they're a very positive, very loyal brothers and sisters here in Israel. They joined the IDF. They've fought all the wars. They're extremely heroic. We view them as our brothers and sisters. But in Syria, the Druze are also loyal to Syria, which was a problem over the years. But now, in recent years, there was this instability with the Bashar al-Assad, the regime, and all the problems that came to the Jewish population in Syria was causing a lot of problems here. The Jews in Israel really, really want us to help them. For them, they are brothers, right? It's cousins and distant family, and it's a very strong part of their culture and heritage. And so they can't stand idly by and just watch their brothers and sisters being slaughtered in Syria. And so they look at the Jewish state and they say, this is, you have to stand behind us now. I mean, we are with you and now you need to be with us. And this is what creates this, this conundrum for us, because the Jews in Syria are physically in Syria. And we have to intervene in one way or another, or we have to think about whether it's wise and how to intervene. But we really do not want to just let that happen because of our allegiance to our Druze brothers and sisters here in Israel, and the understanding that they could potentially be a strategic partner down the line.
And as we take that there from the Druze inside Syria into the challenges that we have of Syria and looking further, Mark, I come back again both to Syria, Iran. One of what I'm going to call the positive results of this new regime with President Ashara is that he is blocking Iran, or more correctly, the Islamic regime of Iran. He is blocking and very much against both the resupply of Hezbollah via Syria, which was before the conduit via the Bashar al-Assad regime. And in its own way, we've also heard in the last few weeks, again, all still inside Syria, of Shiites being sent or recruited inside Syria to take actions against Israel. And as I look into this upcoming week, I go, Iran right now has lost its assets inside Syria, has lost its main, like the child that it raised, if I can put it in my cynical terms, Hezbollah. They can't resupply Hezbollah, both because of the new Syrian regime, but also because of the changes in Lebanon. And right now, they're standing at a stage where they're trying to reassess themselves after the 12 days of rising lion of the Israeli-U.S. Attack against nuclear and other facilities there. When we look into this, as I'm looking forward right now, where's the United States going to take this? Where will President Trump, in that sense, take it right now? Are we going to see real action now to try to continue to stop that nuclear quest, to make sure that they can't redo what was destroyed, and it's so important that it was destroyed? Are these steps that you see right now the administration in Washington taking to make sure that Iran does not try to go back during this time period into that nuclear quest?
Well, I think the United States, in many ways, is going to take its cue from Israel. It is clearly the United States policy that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. That's been the policy of the last 4 presidents ever since the discovery of the Iranian nuclear program. But in terms of actual operations, I think that it'll either be military in support of Israel or a push for snapback provisions at the United Nations. So I think that the United States is going to take a forward-leaning but not a leading position on the issue of Iran. Very quickly on Syria. Syria could very well end up looking like the former Yugoslavia and breaking up into 5 different cantons. Central, the north, where the SDF is starting to act up again and trying to declare federalism. In the east, you still have ISIS. In the south, I understand the view that the Israelis are inside of Syria to protect their brother Druze, but let's be pragmatic. It's also to get some forward defense, very much the way the Turks are doing in the north. So it's not pure altruistic of Israel to be inside of southern Syria. A little forward defense is a good thing. And then, of course, you've got in the west, you have the remnants of the Assad regime, and as well as the Russian presence. So in the context of all that, I really don't think that Iran has got a lot of room to maneuver in there, since there's so many other players, most of who are against Iran. So I think the United States will continue to focus on the Iranian nuclear issue at first and be less fussed about the whole issue of Iran inside of Syria.
So I take where you are right now, and let's talk for a moment about those other players, because Anab, if we think about the other players right now, inside Israel at least, there's a sense of, on the one hand, the other players, and here I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, about the Gulf countries, but we can never forget Turkey, which is such an important player when it comes here to the Middle East. The PKK in this last week taking down their arms, suddenly saying that they're not a terrorist organization, kind of a secular terrorist organization that's de-arming itself, such an exceptional event to have happened inside our arena. If I look around right now, are there voices right now that are going to really be changing? Can there really be that kind of change? Bring in Syria, not as a peace treaty, but bring in Syria. I don't even know what Turkey would do in that sense without a resolution of the fighting in the Gaza Strip. Do you see things that could go on without resolving the fighting against Hamas in the Gaza Strip?
Unfortunately, it's a little bit too early for me to give a very good assessment. And I agree with U.S. envoy to Syria, Tom Barak, and he said that that he believes that normalizing, whether it's normalizing with Israel or normalizing, period, that it's like unwrapping an onion slowly. There are a lot of parameters that go into that. But I think that there's one thing that I think is key here, and General Kemen also highlighted that it's really about the United States taking a proactive role. And I think that for the Trump administration, this also means having a good relationship with Turkey. I think for the Trump administration, they see how much Turkey is important, not just on the Middle East issues, but also on Ukraine, on the Caucasus, on other very important topics and peace agreements that the Trump administration is looking forward to. And I think that having some sort of agreement and actively engaging with Turkey will be key for that. And also making sure that Turkey and Israel do see eye to eye when it comes to stabilizing Syria. And I think that this is really what the United States posture is and is going to be forward, especially with the Trump administration.
So it's interesting because you presented something with Turkey that I'm not sure that I specifically agree with. I think that right now Turkey has become an extremely vehement anti-Israel rhetoric. And to me, it's always surprising that we actually still have diplomatic ties with them. And I say that because most of the rhetoric that comes out of Turkey when it comes about Israel has to do with the Gaza Strip, has to do both with Hamas, Gaza Strip, Palestinians in general. And I say that because at the end of the day, when we look around, and this is a hard, tough question in that sense, as I'm looking here into the summer and into our crystal balls. Israel is trying to implement, at the same time, get back all of the hostages, destroy Hamas, and create some kind of a humanitarian reality to keep people's lives in the Gaza Strip. Never easy to do all three. And in this last day, the Israeli Defense Forces of all of the different things have come to the Israeli government, at least according to the publications that were here, and said, we can't just establish a humanitarian zone. Can you talk us through a bit more about what it means, a humanitarian zone? In its own way, also, why is Israel so vehemently against the way the humanitarian relief was done until we helped establish these new types of humanitarian relief efforts?
Okay, well, you asked a lot of questions here. We'll start by saying that the mechanism that distributed food or humanitarian supplies through the international aid organizations was mainly taken by Hamas for their own use, or for them to kind of resell it to the population in Gaza for very steep prices. And we've seen this for over a year and a half. We see, a tremendous amount of humanitarian aid coming into the Gaza Strip and does not go into the hands of the people in Gaza. And so on one hand, you have the what I would call in quotes the international community kind of condemns Israel for not taking care of the civilians of Gaza, for not taking care of the fact that supplies are not getting to the people. And then on the other hand, they're not willing to admit to the fact that the mechanism is broken. So for us here in Israel, we know that some of these groups or some of the people on the ground working for these groups are complicit in this effort. And some are just, kind of don't have a choice. And that, when you work in an area that is controlled by armed groups, sometimes, that's just the reality that you have to face. And we know this from other places around the world. So it was very clear, I think, early on that we must find a different mechanism, because this kind of keeps Hamas alive because they use the supplies, and it keeps them alive because it gives them leverage to continue to control the civilian population. So I had several suggestions of how to do it. Other people had several suggestions. The GHF was established just over 2 months ago. I think they succeeded to do more in 2 months than the other groups have succeeded to do in a year and a half plus. So we already see the fact that if you take the humanitarian issue out of the hands of Hamas and do it independently, then you can have both of these goals achieved. And that would make a world of difference. First of all, in terms of people can break free from Hamas and seek other things for their own future, but also for Israeli purposes of winning the war, getting back the hostages, and kind of changing the reality on the ground. So when you think about that, the next step would be to do it in a larger scale. So the idea of having like a large humanitarian zone that is free from Hamas, where people can come and stay until the war is over, and there they can receive, quietly and safely all the aid that they need. That's the idea that has led to kind of look for a new and kind of greater solution. I don't know if that answers your question.
Wow. No, I think that what we just heard right now in that sense is really a broad sense of trying to understand both the difficulties of what was here before, and also that at the end, it's not something that you can just go around, reestablish something new, and hope it'll happen right overnight. As I look at this right now, I just want to say to each and every one of you that when we look at what we're having right now, so I said at the beginning, 647 days, think of all we have right now inside Israel. Facing on the one hand, a border with Syria with this new regime. Haven't talked about Lebanon, Hezbollah, and what they're trying or not trying to do. Out in Iran right now, yes, no, snapback. Will there be sanctions? What will that do inside of Iran? And how will that also have an impact back on and in? And at the end, 50 hostages still in the Gaza Strip. Hamas still, as you said before, using the leverage of the humanitarian aid to keep their power and their capabilities. This is not necessarily how we want to look at this forward right now. We'll have lots of additional different aspects right now. I would like to thank our three wonderful panelists for joining us today, Zainab Ribua and Ifa Segel and Mark Kemet. And to the three of you, I want to say that for the first time, as far as I know, we've managed to have a panel here at TV7 where we have an absolute majority of women. So Mark, thank you for joining us three women in our panel in that sense today. It's been a pleasure hosting all three of you. Thank you all, and shalom from Jerusalem.
My name is Eran Lehrman. I used to be Deputy National Security Advisor to the Government of Israel, currently Vice President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, a think tank, and the editor of the Jerusalem Strategic Tribune. For the last few years, I've been a regular panelist for TV7, a fantastic opportunity to bring deep and analytical perspectives to the debate over regional affairs, Israeli affairs, international affairs, in the company of some of the best minds in Israel.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.